8:45. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Here is the news edited by Danushka Madhawala and read by Indrani Senanayaka. The headlines. U.S. delegation meets President to discuss economic crisis. The visiting U.S. delegation promised to provide technical support for state financial management. Sri Lanka's exports record $5 billion in 5 months. COPA has made recommendations to the officials of the Ministry of Power and Energy to explore possibilities of producing LP gas and crude oil locally. Final decision on bus fare revision expected tomorrow. A special ferry service between South India and Kankesantore will commence shortly. Russian ambassador to Sri Lanka called on the president today. In foreign news, G7 leaders detail a $600 billion plan to rival China's Belt and Road Initiative. In sports news, England captain Owen Morgan set to retire from international cricket. The visiting high-level delegation representing the U.S. State Department and U.S. Treasury Department has met with Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today. Members of the delegation include Deputy Assistant Secretary of Treasury for Asia, Robert Caproth, and Ambassador Kelly Kedeling, who is also the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia. The U.S. Treasury's Robert Caproth, U.S. State Department's Kelly Kedeling and the U.S. Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chang, had met with President Rajapaksa to discuss Sri Lanka's economic crisis. The visiting delegation had also held a meeting with Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe at the PM's office this morning. The delegation also promised to provide technical support for state financial management. The delegation, including officials from the U.S. Department of the Treasury and the U.S. Department of State, had arrived in Sri Lanka yesterday morning for a 3-day visit. The visitors are expected to meet with a wide range of political representatives, economists and international organizations in Sri Lanka from the 26th to the 29th of June, the U.S. Embassy in Colombo had said. A final decision is expected to be reached tomorrow regarding bus fares to be implemented from the 1st of July. The bus operators' trade unions stated yesterday that the bus fare should be increased in line with the increase in fuel prices. Director General of the National Transport Commission, Dr. Nilan Miranda, said a final decision on the revision of bus fares will be taken after a discussion with the Minister of Transport tomorrow. He stated that the revision in bus fares will be implemented on the 1st of July each year and that the National Transport Commission is currently making calculations on this under 12 factors. He stated that due to the recent increase in fuel prices, there have been calls for a fare revision, and a meeting in this regard will be held tomorrow between the Minister of Transport and the representatives of the relevant associations. The recommendations made by the National Transport Commission on the revision of bus fares will be forwarded to the Ministry of Transport, and based on its approval, it will come into effect from the 1st of July, he said. Sri Lanka's exports recorded $5 billion in the first 5 months of this year, according to the Export Development Board. Earnings from the merchandise exports increased by 9.9% year-on-year to $980.2 million in May 2022, as per the data released by the Sri Lanka Customs. This was mainly due to the increase in earnings from the export of apparels and textiles, coconut-based products, and electrical and electronic components. Major product sectors, except spices and concentrates, tea and rubber-based products, apparel and textiles, coconut-based products, electrical and electronic components, and food and beverages, seafood and ornamental fish recorded increases in exports in May 2022. This news comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. We continue with local news. A special ferry service between South India and Kankesantore will commence shortly. Minister Douglas Devananda said the Cabinet has given approval for this request. Accordingly, the first journey with passengers will commence on the 1st of next month. The ferry service was suspended for some time due to various logistic reasons. COPA has made recommendations to the officials of the Ministry of Power and Energy to explore possibilities of producing LP gas and crude oil in the country. This was revealed at a COPA meeting held recently under the chairmanship of parliamentarian Professor Tissa Vitharana. The meeting was focused on oil exploration and to tap the other natural resources to produce the required fuel to meet the local demand. Sri Lanka is enriched with many energy resources, Professor Vitharana added.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatma.
On to the main news story. The Russian ambassador to Sri Lanka called on President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today. The president praised the support extended by the Russian government to Sri Lanka. According to the president's media division, the president and the ambassador had discussed matters relating to fuel, gas, coal, aviation, education, trade, tea and fertilizer.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatma.
On to Watchlight. Sri Lanka Navy personnel pressed into action to clear debris and other remains collected in a tributary belonging to the Dedaro Oya, which flows in the Ada Vilundava area of Puttalam. The Navy shouldered this task from the 22nd to the 24th of June to clear the tributary as it was blocked by the overgrowth of aquatic plants and the accumulation of waste. Responding to a request by the Department of Irrigation, Puttalam, the Command Diving Unit undertook the particular task under the guidance of the Commander of the Northwestern Naval Area, Rear Admiral Suresh De Silva. The aquatic vegetation and other remains which blocked the regular flow of water in the Pahina Bay of Anavilodava were removed. The timely move helped overcome difficulties in obtaining water for agricultural purposes and minimizing the risk of floods as well. World News, the headlines. G7 leaders detail a $600 billion plan to rival China's Belt and Road Initiative. Japan urges 37 million people to switch off lights. NASA launches first rocket from Australian commercial spaceport. G7 leaders have detailed plans to mobilize $600 billion in funding for the developing world in a move seen as a counter to China's Belt and Road Plan. The Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment relaunches a scheme unveiled at last year's G7 talks in England. US President Joe Biden said the plan would deliver returns for everyone. China's multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure initiative is criticized for hitting nations with too much debt. The scheme would allow countries to see the concrete benefits of partnering with democracies, the US president added. The plan calls on G7 leaders to raise $600 billion over 5 years to fund the launch of infrastructure projects in middle and low-income countries. Japan's government has urged people in Tokyo and its surrounding areas to use less electricity today, as it warned that supplies will be strained as the country faces a heat wave. The Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry expects demands for power to be severe this afternoon, local time. It said people should switch off unnecessary lights but still use their air conditioning to avoid heat stroke. For weeks, officials have warned of a power crunch as temperatures rise. An unassuming patch of red dirt in remote Australia has made history as a site of NASA's first rocket launch from a commercial spaceport outside the US. The suborbital rocket blasted off from the tiny site early today local time. It will enable astrophysics studies that can only be undertaken in the southern hemisphere, NASA says. The launch was also the first in Australia in more than 25 years. The rocket is NASA's first of 3 to blast off from the newly constructed Arnhem Space Center on the edge of the Northern Territory. To end this bulletin of world news, we take a look at the headlines again. G7 leaders detail a $600 billion US plan to rival China's Belt and Road Initiative. Japan urges 37 million people to switch off lights, and NASA launches first rocket from Australian commercial spaceport. That ends this bulletin of world news. On to development news. Laughs Gas plc has announced that the distribution of gas was currently underway in the country. Issuing a statement, the gas supplier further requested the public to refrain from paying exorbitant amounts to purchase gas cylinders. The company has also issued a list of the price of its gas cylinders for various parts of the country. That was development news.
Sports News is brought to you by
Sampath Bank. We present your future.
England's World Cup winning captain Owen Morgan is set to retire from international cricket. An official announcement could be made tomorrow. Under Morgan, England won the 2019 World Cup and reached the top of the one-day and 2020 rankings. The 35-year-old, who took charge of the T20 side in 2012 and one-day side in 2014, has struggled for form and fitness in recent times, with Joe Butler the favourite to replace him.
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Workers at Chile's state mining company Codelco, the largest producer of copper in the world, have launched an open-end strike in protest of the government's closing of a foundry to curtail pollution. At least 18 people were arrested after the strike began on Wednesday. Workers gathered at 6 mining facilities around the country, blocking the entrances and setting tires on fire. Among the facilities targeted was the Ventanas foundry, which the government announced last week that it would shut down after a series of sulfur dioxide poisonings were reported in the area. That was Business News.
Business News, sponsored by
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. Will you be the lucky winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee? 50 gold sovereigns for the top prize winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee. Scooters for the 10 second prize winners. iPhones for the 10 third prize winners. Mountain bikes for the 29 fourth prize winners. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
On to economic news. Russia defaulted on its foreign currency sovereign debt for the first time in a century, the culmination of ever tougher Western sanctions that shut down payment routes to overseas creditors. For months, the country found paths around the penalties imposed after the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. But at the end of the day on Sunday, the grace period on about $100 million of shared interest payments due on the 27th of May expired, a deadline considered an event of default if missed. And finally, we take a look at the weather report. The Met Department says showery conditions over the southwestern part of the island is expected to enhance slightly from today. Showers or thundershowers will occur at times in the western, Sabaragamuwa and northwestern provinces and in the Kandy, Nuwara, Galle and Matara districts. Fairly heavy showers above 50 millimeters may occur at times in places in the Sabaragamuwa province and in the Kandy and Nuwara districts. Showers or thundershowers will occur at a few places in the Uva province and in the Ampara and Batikolo districts during the afternoon or at night. To end tonight's news broadcast, we take a look at the headlines again. U.S. delegation meets President to discuss economic crisis. The visiting U.S. delegation promised to provide technical support for state financial management. Sri Lanka's export record $5 billion in 5 months. COPA has made recommendations to the officials of the Ministry of Power and Energy to explore possibilities of producing LP gas and crude oil locally. Financial decision on bus fare revision expected tomorrow. A special ferry service between South India and Kankesantare will commence shortly. Russian ambassador to Sri Lanka called on the president today. In foreign news, G7 leaders detailed $600 billion plan to rival China's Belt and Road Initiative. And in sports news, England captain Owen Morgan set to retire from international cricket. That ends tonight's news broadcast.